The Able to Care podcast is sponsored by Able Training Support Limited, who build partnerships with organisations to develop confidence and competence in their team to promote positive outcomes for all. Find the link in the description. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Able to Care podcast. I'm your host, Andy Baker, and on this episode, we're going to be talking about creating a sensory safe space. Within lots of different care settings and people's homes, we may be supporting individuals who have sensory difficulties or differences or a disorder. So about 90% of individuals on the autistic spectrum have sensory processing issues, but about 10 to 15% of the general population also have challenges with sensory processing. I've also found that many individuals who've experienced early life trauma, abuse, neglect can also struggle with their sensory processing. Fetal alcohol spectrum disorder affects with sensory processing. And we can also then go the other end of the spectrum. So many individuals with other additional learning disabilities, but also mental health conditions can also have challenges within sensory world. And then we can go to the far end of the spectrum of those living with dementia where there may be significant sensory changes from what they're going through. So thinking about the environment from a sensory point of view is really important. When I'm doing supporting behavioral work and helping individuals to manage kind of distressed behavior and hazardous behavior, one of the starting points we have to work from is, what's the environment like? Is there things in the environment that are already causing stress and distress? Because if there is, straight away, we need to control those first. Prevention is better than cure. So thinking about a few things, we may not be able to make an environment perfect, but there should be places that any individual can go to, which hopefully helps them to feel safe and secure. And having some sensory safe spaces, I think, is really beneficial, and planning an environment round to ensure that's included within our environmental plan. One of the things that, let's say within our own home, for instance, sometimes we could say, well, their bedroom is a safe place for them to go. The only challenge with that, and it depends on the young person or it depends on the child, sometimes the bedroom feels very isolating. It's upstairs when everybody else is downstairs. It could be away from everybody. It's a closed door, which means I don't know what's going on the other side of it. Some individuals that's not going to work for. That sensory safe place ideally needs to be somewhere that's close enough to be near everybody, but still reduces the stimulus appropriately. So finding the right spot, first off, is really important. The second thing that we're also looking at is the design of the environment. So we're going to predominantly focus on just the sort of four senses that are really important around the sensory environment. Obviously, there is other senses, but if we focus on visual, auditory, tactile, and also then olfactory, I think gustatory we can kind of take out a little bit because obviously that's taste or eating and not particularly or necessarily important to the environment itself. So if we look at those four particular senses then, starting off with visual. So one is a low stimulus environment. Okay. So for many individuals, if they are hyposensitive or hypersensitive, there may be either a lack of visual stimulus or there may be an excess of visual stimulus. So if there's an excess of visual stimulus, then having a low stimulus environment can be really useful. So one thing we can think about is the ability to change the lighting, whether it be to change it to colored lighting, whether it be colored lighting effects or like almost disco ball type things that offer some level of visual stimulus, or whether it just be, I can dim the lights right down. If we're working with somebody, let's say a child who is hyposensitive, they may benefit from being able to have that extra visual stimulus, one of the planetary, like the star projectors or things like that, for instance, or say a disco ball creating moving lights. This can also be the same at the other end of the spectrum. So those living well with dementia may also find that they enjoy that visual stimulus on the walls. They like it. Okay? But other individuals will want it much more plain. They'll want it low stimulus, okay? A lack of activity, especially if they're wanting to de-stress or focus on other things. The same as if you think about, for all of us, typical or not, some people prefer to work in a environment where there's things going on that they can be distracted for a second. They feel included and part of it, whereas others just want a blank wall so they're not distracted at all. So soft paints, also we can think about even colors. We know that colors obviously do affect mood. So red can increase a sense of anxiety and anger, whereas blues and greens tend to cause more calming effect and cooler effect and more focus as well. So maybe thinking about the actual colors we're utilizing. We don't want to make the space feel cold, but we can help it to feel calm. I remember I went to an elderly care setting and there was a quiet lounge, and I almost guaranteed as soon as I walked in that very few people spent any time within that particular lounge. When I asked the staff whether any residents did or not, the response was no, not really. They don't seem to like it. And I knew straight away why. There was a wonderful dynamic wallpaper that was covering a whole wall of this particular room. The room was nice. It was nicely laid out. It was nice carpet, nice chairs. But this one wall was just covered in butterflies. And I said, that looks lovely and it's really dynamic. But for somebody who is experiencing hallucinations or has visual processing issues, those butterflies may come alive. They may be flying around the head. And for some individuals, that would not be a pleasant experience and definitely not relaxing. So we ought to think about, as far as lighting and environment, is there anything that could trigger emotional responses, whether that be trauma-based, so things from their past, or whether it could be misconstrued or perceived as something else. If we think about the dressing gown on the back of the door kind of thing, well, we all remember experiencing that as a kid where it looked like there was a person standing in the room. So is there things like that in this environment? Shadows can become things when we're dealing with hallucinations and delusions. Moving on to the auditory side of things. So whenever we're dealing with kind of the auditory, we ideally want some quiet area away from other distractions and noises. But sometimes people don't like silence. If you think again, for many people when they get home, some people are so pleased to get home because the hustle bustle of their daily life is a case that they just walk into their house and it's silent and quiet and it's Whereas other people, that sounds horrific for them. As soon as they walk in that door, they'll have the TV on or the music on or the radio on or something. They want noise in the background because silence might mean their brain starts working or starts thinking. So for some people, again, this is where we try and make sure it's person-centered. And it's a real challenge when we're in residential because we've got however many people that all want to be happy. So is there places this person can go? Or can we provide and meet this need in a way that doesn't affect others? So if it's somebody who does prefer noise, well, can they have headphones where they can listen to their music or have something on? Would it be better to have the environment quiet? Or would it be better to have a white noise machine or now I think there's pink noise machine and brown noise machine and all sorts of noise machines, but anything like that creates this kind of single sound that drowns out some of the other noises and distractions in the environment, some people would find more soothing. Let's move on to touch a little bit. So when we're looking at touch again, it depends on my personal preferences. Some people like soft and warm. Some people like sort of cold and hard. So we do need to, again, make sure it's suitable for the individuals. But generally, making an environment comfortable, soft, with different textures that the person feels comfortable with, definitely ones that they're familiar with if we're working with somebody on the autistic spectrum, because it may be new textures feel overwhelming. So making sure there's some tactile stimulus in there. The other thing we touch is make sure there is some activities that feel appropriate for them and maybe some autonomy and some choice within that as well, so they can choose what they would like to engage with at that particular time. The other thing we touch, we could also provide sensory objects as well, whether that be weighted blankets or whether it be things like medicine balls or anything along those like weighted vests that give the person a sense of comfort and security. This is where sometimes bean bags can really come into play because they offer that sense of compression without any level of restriction. Now, the last one I kind of refer to a little bit is on smells. Now, aromatherapy has been demonstrated to be quite beneficial for, let's say, elderly care settings, and some individuals it works really well. The important thing is that smells that suit them. So an example of a smell that is usually considered to be calming and relaxing is something like lavender. But I actually know somebody who is almost allergic to lavender. They can't cope with that smell. It triggers them. So straight away, that would not work for them. So again, diffusers or scented candles, depending on the safety of the environment, might be really beneficial for some individuals to get a sense of well-being and calm. And it's worth researching as far as different groups or different ages. sometimes have a preference to certain smells and certain inputs based on history and things like that. We all know, for instance, that the smell of baking bread is something that supermarkets use to make us hungrier, because when we're hungry, we buy more. So we can use similar kind of principles to create calming effects, or to promote sleeping, or even to promote wakefulness. There was an interesting study I read one time, or it might have been a talk that I heard about it, where it was a care home that was actually looking at increasing nutrition, increasing nutritional content for individuals living with dementia. And they were using smells to help do that. So they were putting the smell of coffee through the home in the morning, because that helped people to orientate to the fact that it was morning, but also it seemed to make them want breakfast. They put the smell of baking bread through the home at lunchtime, because that seemed to promote people wanting and increasing their appetite to go, I'm hungry. And then they did hot chocolate in the evening, because it seemed to, again, help people or promote people towards an evening snack or a supper, but also to start getting ready for bed and thinking about bedtime. So it seemed to offer, again, some routine and structure for their day, using smells as a route to do that. One other thing that might be worthwhile as well, depending on the individual, is having spaces that the person can move around and exercise. So we've focused on the 4 senses, but obviously there is others like proprioception and vestibular, and those are involved in movement and knowing our motor sensory system. So if our motor sensory system, if I need to move, I need to climb, I need to swing, I need to spin, are those things in that environment that help me to re-regulate? So we might find for some individuals that calm space might actually be the trampoline. So again, we're working around that person-centered, finding out what works and what doesn't. So let's go through a few key kind of golden rules to summarize what we've been going through. So first off, let's look at minimizing stimulus. Again, suitable and individualized as much as we possibly can, but let's take some of the clutter, let's take some of the noise away, and then at least we can build on top of that. So we start almost with a blank canvas, and then we can add to it, rather than starting with a completely covered canvas and then trying to take stuff away. Provide choices. Everybody has preferences. And I know this may be difficult based on the resources available, space available, staffing available. You know, in an idealistic environment, every individual would have that own space that they could kind of utilize as their safe escape place. That isn't always possible. But the more choice we've got, the better. Some people like it quiet, some people like it noisy, some people like it busy, some people like it quiet, some people like it bright, some people like it dark. Create predictability. A consistent routine and layout of that particular room, though, can be really beneficial. And maybe it's something that's utilized at certain times throughout the day. So if we, an analogy that you may hear me use lots and lots is a bottle of Coke analogy, that sometimes bottle of Cokes get shaken up and the lid comes off and it wasn't anything we did, we just get covered in the stuff. But if we know there are certain things that shake up the bottle of Coke, but we know that their sensory calm space is something that settles that bottle of Coke down, well, then can we use the sensory calm space before, during, or after stressful activities or stressful events that can actually then reduce the chances of that bottle of Coke exploding? I'd like to really think about that when we're creating proactive plans. If I know I'm about to take somebody into a stressful scenario, can I take them down to settled first using that calm space? Or if I've just taken them through something stressful, can I take them into a calm space next before I take them something else that's stressful? This is where creating those routines and those plans can be really beneficial. Last one is obviously ensuring safety in that environment. It needs to be a place that they can be safe. So we are obviously thinking about the health and safety side of things, removing any hazards, but also offering secure boundaries and helping that person to feel that's a safe place for them, which might actually be a limitation of who else is allowed in there or who else is allowed to integrate, or the permissions people may have before they enter that space, for instance. It's giving not just boundaries for them, it could be boundaries for other people, the rules other people should follow in that particular space as well. Okay, so the hope is you've picked up a few ideas from this short video. I know that time and space can sometimes feel like it's against us. One of the things I always promote is that sometimes the things that we do in advance that take a little bit longer can actually save us a lot of time in the long run. If we are creating that safe space in advance, that calming environment, we might find then we're having to deal with less behavior that challenges or less distress. And therefore, we're actually spending less time reacting to behaviors, having to write it up, having to record it, because we put the work in at the beginning. We've been preventative and proactive. So experiment to find what works for you. There isn't a one size fits all, and you're not going to get it right first time. But that's why I said start from a blank slate or a blank canvas and then build up, rather than trying to start from a full one and tip extra bits you don't like out. See what you can do. I'd be interested to hear comments and ideas, and please share within the community as far as what works, what doesn't, what have you found useful for you. Little tips and tricks would be amazing to kind of share across that community. Thanks for tuning in.